She said it in a fight. It wasn't planned, at least not the way planned things arrive. It was the version that appears when someone is angry, and anger removes the filter that normally keeps certain truths inside. We were in the kitchen, Thursday night. I'd come home from the hospital at 11, 12 hours of orthopedic surgery, 2 knees, a femur fracture that took 4 hours. I heated something, sat at the table. She was in the hallway with her phone, talking quietly, and when I came in, she hung up too quickly. I asked who it was. She said a friend. I said she didn't need to hide. She said I was paranoid. I said she'd hung up when I walked in. And she, in a movement I can only understand as the combination of accumulated anger and exhaustion with the lie, turned to me and said, "I love him, Henry, but you pay for everything, so leave me alone." My name is Henry Allen, 52 years old, orthopedic surgeon in Chicago, Northwestern graduate, 18 years of private practice and hospital work. Sandra was 44. We'd been married 11 years. She had stopped working 6 years earlier, a joint decision because her therapy practice wasn't growing the way we'd hoped, and because I had sufficient income for both of us. For 6 years, I had paid for everything: housing, travel, gym, courses, clothes, restaurants, and the person she loved while I paid for everything. That night, after she said it and went to the bedroom, I sat at the kitchen table for about 40 minutes with my food forgotten in front of me. I wasn't processing the betrayal. I'd already processed pieces of it over the previous months, the pieces I'd filed as phase, distance, her stress. I was processing the sentence, because the sentence was more revealing than the betrayal itself. I love him, but you pay for everything. There was no guilt in it. There was logic. The logic of someone who had calculated that the arrangement was working. Love with one, financial security with another, and who was annoyed that I'd dared to question the arrangement by asking questions. That sentence doesn't come from someone who slipped. It comes from someone who had built a structure and was angry that the structure was being questioned. I called Patricia Chen, my family law attorney. It was almost midnight. She picked up on the third ring. "Patricia, I need an urgent meeting. Separation with a specific situation." "Henry, tomorrow at 8. The meeting with Patricia lasted 2 hours. 11 years of marriage, property regime, community property. She stopped working how many years ago? 6. Your income during the period? I gave the numbers. They were substantial. Documentation of contributions? All financial activity flows through my account. I have bank statements for all 11 years. Assets acquired during marriage? The Chicago condo, down payment with pre-marriage inheritance money documented. The lake house, purchased during marriage but with proceeds from selling stocks I'd acquired before. 2 cars, joint investments. Does she have any current income? 0. 6 years of 0. Patricia closed her notebook. "Henry, what she said in the kitchen, do you have a recording?" "No recording." "But you heard it clearly." "Clearly." "Do you know who he is?" "I suspect. A man from her hiking group she's been attending for 2 years. Name? Brian Marsh, 42 years old, architect. 3 days to build the complete position. Meanwhile, no more confrontation, don't move money, don't change routine. The phrase she said in the kitchen was a procedural gift. Let me find out how large. Stop here for a moment. A procedural gift, that's what Patricia said, because most men who arrive before a family court judge arrive empty-handed. They arrive with pain, with anger, with the moral certainty of having been betrayed, but without documentation of contributions, without an asset inventory, without the history that transforms indignation into legal position. And the judge doesn't rule on who suffered more. The judge rules on what's documented. Financial planning for retirees was created so you never arrive unprotected at that table. 5 spots at the lowest price this material has ever had. The 6th pays full price, no exceptions. The link is in the first pinned comment. Open it now before continuing. The 3 days that followed were the strangest I remember. Sandra and I shared the apartment like 2 strangers sharing space out of logistical necessity. She asked the next morning if I was okay. I said yes. She asked if I wanted to talk about what had happened. I said when the right moment came, I'd let her know. She didn't understand what that meant. She interpreted it as coldness. It was sequence. Patricia called on day 4. "Henry, position built. Can you come in today?" She received me with a thick folder. 88% of the joint estate was formed exclusively from your resources: work income, inheritance, pre-marriage asset sales. The Chicago condo has the down payment documented as premarital patrimony. The lake house follows the same logic. What's the scenario? With your documentation, we can construct a disproportionate contribution argument that substantially reduces her share of the division. And alimony? She hasn't worked in 6 years. This is where the kitchen phrase becomes the gift I mentioned. She paused. In a divorce based on evidenced infidelity, where the non-working party was being maintained by the spouse while maintaining an extramarital relationship, the judge has broad discretion on spousal support. It's not automatic. It requires proof. I have an investigator. You have 3 weeks before I file. The investigator delivered in 12 days. Brian Marsh and Sandra had met an average of 3 times per week for the past 18 months. Hotel in New York, 2 documented visits. And one additional detail: a transfer of $9,000 from Sandra's account, which received allowance funds from our joint account, to a Brian Marsh account, recorded as renovation project deposit. There was no renovation. The money had flowed from our joint account to the lover. When I presented that detail to Patricia, she said, "Henry, with this, we're no longer just talking about division reduction. What changes? Transfer of marital assets to a third party without the knowledge or consent of the other spouse can be characterized as dissipation of marital assets. It's an additional argument the judge will hear with great attention. And the alimony? With documented dissipation and evidenced infidelity, her request for spousal support becomes extremely fragile." We filed 3 weeks after the kitchen night. Sandra was served on a Monday morning. She called 7 times before I came out of surgery. I responded with one short message: "All communication goes through Patricia Chen. Her number is in the header of the notification." The process lasted 6 months. Her attorney tried 5 strategies. The documentation answered all 5. Then came the hearing. Patricia placed the investigator's report on the table. The judge picked it up, turned the pages slowly: the bank statements, the transfer, the hotel dates. And in that silence, in the face of a 60-year-old man who'd spent 3 decades reading these files, the smile appeared. Not amusement, the specific smile of someone who recognizes when one party came prepared and the other didn't realize it. Spousal support, denied. Dissipation, recognized. Final agreement, approved at the hearing. Chicago condo, 68% to me. Lake house, 62% to me. Joint investments, 71% to me. Spousal support, 0. After the hearing, Patricia said in the parking lot, "Henry, what made this process different was the quality of prior preparation. You brought 11 years of organized statements. That was the case." The phrase helped. The phrase was the emotional trigger that made you call me at midnight. She paused. What won the case was already documented before she said it. That stayed with me. Not the phrase. What was already ready before the phrase. The judge smiled, and the gavel came down on the right side. Henry Allen, orthopedic surgeon, Chicago. Take care. See you next episode. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I read them all. There's something about the judge's smile I want to describe with precision. It wasn't when Patricia presented the investigator's report. It was before that. It was when Sandra's attorney was presenting the spousal support request, with that cadence of someone who has rehearsed the arguments, that confidence of someone who believes 6 years of financial dependence creates an automatic right. And the judge was listening with that neutral, professional expression judges use when they're waiting for the other side to finish, so they can give the floor to the side that has the file. Then Patricia placed the report on the table. She didn't say anything yet, she just placed it. The judge picked it up, leafed through the first pages, the statements, the transfer, the hotel dates. And it was there, in the silence of a 60-year-old man who had spent 3 decades reading these files, that the smile appeared. Not amusement, recognition. The recognition of someone who knows the type of case where one party tried to use the system and arrived at the hearing without realizing the other had already arrived first. I was on the left side of the room, sitting next to Patricia, and I saw that smile straight on. It was the confirmation I didn't know I needed. My brother called me the week after the hearing. He and I are not the kind of men who talk much about personal things. We understand each other in the code of men who grew up not learning to name what they feel. He asked how I was. I said fine. He asked if I needed anything. I said no. There was a silence of about 20 seconds, the kind of silence that between brothers means, I believe you, but I'm here if you change your mind. Then he said, next time you're in Milwaukee, dinner's on me. I said yes. I didn't tell him the details of the process. He didn't need them. He just needed to know I was standing, and that was enough. Because there are people in life who don't need the full summary to be present. They just need to know you're still going, and keep going. There's one last thing about that phrase from the kitchen. I love him, but you pay for everything. I spent time thinking about it, not with obsession, with the clinical curiosity that medical work gives you for symptoms that reveal more than the patient intended to show. The phrase wasn't a mistake. It was an involuntary diagnosis. The diagnosis of an arrangement she had normalized so thoroughly that she no longer needed to hide it emotionally, only logistically. And when the stress of me questioning her removed the logistical layer, what remained was the bare structure. Love here, money there. 2 columns in a spreadsheet that should never have existed. But they existed. And when the judge saw the complete spreadsheet, with 11 years of bank statements and an investigator's report, he smiled before bringing down the gavel. Because the spreadsheet told the complete truth, not either party's version. The truth that numbers tell when nobody can edit them. Henry Allen, orthopedic surgeon, Chicago. The gavel came down on the right side. Take care. See you next episode. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I returned to work normally the week after the hearing. 2 knees on Thursday, a hip fracture on Friday, a shoulder on Monday. Work continues. It always continues. And when I'm in the operating room, with all attention on the procedure, the instruments, the patient's position, the monitor, the surgical field, there's no room for anything else. That's also a way of moving forward. The simplest one, the most available one. There's no dramaturgy needed for that, no special reflection. There's the next patient, the next procedure, the next diagnosis. 18 years of practice teach you that continuity isn't indifference. Continuity is the most honest respect you can give to the work you chose. A colleague at the hospital asked me months later how I'd navigated the process without it affecting my work performance. You seemed completely normal throughout, he said. I had no idea. Sequence, I said. Sequence? You separate what's happening from what needs to be done. What was happening was a marriage ending and a legal process running. What needed to be done was surgery, accurate, on the right patients, at the right times. The 2 things ran in parallel. They didn't contaminate each other. That sounds difficult. It is. But the alternative, letting the personal situation degrade the professional, isn't acceptable in my field. You can't have a surgeon half present in an operating room because his divorce is running. So you just compartmentalized. I just did what needed to be done, in both spaces. He nodded. That's a remarkable amount of discipline. It's how I was trained to practice medicine, I said. Document everything. Respond to what's in front of you. Don't guess. Applies to divorce law too, apparently. Applies to everything, apparently. Henry Allen. The phrase, the file, the judge's smile, and the gavel coming down on the right side. Orthopedic surgeon, Chicago. Always documented, always present. Take care. See you next episode. Patricia told me something in our final meeting that I carry with me. Henry, in many years of family law, what has given me the most clarity about outcomes was always the quality of client preparation. Not the emotional part, the documentary part. You brought 11 years of organized statements. That was the case. I thought about that driving back to the hospital. 18 years of medical practice teach you to record everything. Every procedure documented, every diagnosis dated, every patient evolution noted. Professional habit that transferred without me planning it. Sometimes the discipline of work protects you in life before you know you're going to need that protection. The phrase, "I love him, but you pay for everything," could have been the worst moment of that marriage. Instead, it became the moment that clarified everything. Not about who she was or what she had done, about what I needed to do next. And the clarity that came in those 40 minutes in the kitchen, sitting with cold food, understanding what the sentence really meant, was the clarity that made everything that followed possible. Not anger, not shock, not the desire for confrontation. Clarity. The specific clarity of someone who finally has all the information and knows what to do with it. That's the only kind that matters in a process like this. Henry Allen, orthopedic surgeon, Chicago. The judge smiled. The gavel came down on the right side. Take care. See you next episode.